My mom always said I look like the milkman. I thought she was joking until I found my real dad's name on a hidden birth certificate. Growing up, my mother had this running joke that never failed to make the whole family laugh at dinner parties. Whenever someone commented on how different I looked from my father, my sandy blonde hair against his dark brown, my green eyes compared to his deep hazel ones, she'd wave her hand dismissively and say with a mischievous grin, "Oh, that's because he looks just like the milkman." Everyone would burst into laughter. Even Dad would chuckle and ruffle my hair, adding, "Good thing the milkman was handsome, right, kiddo?" It became such a family trademark that by the time I was 16, I was rolling my eyes and finishing the punchline myself before Mom could deliver it. The joke followed me through high school, college, and into my early 20s. It was harmless family lore, the kind of silly tradition that makes holidays memorable and gives relatives something to reminisce about. I never questioned it, never wondered why it came so easily to her lips, or why sometimes her smile seemed to falter just slightly after everyone stopped laughing. It wasn't until I was 28, helping Mom clean out the attic after Dad's sudden heart attack, that the joke stopped being funny. We'd been up there for hours, sorting through decades of accumulated memories. Christmas decorations mixed with old tax returns, photo albums stacked next to forgotten exercise equipment. The August heat made the small space stifling, and we were both exhausted and emotional. Dad had only been gone 3 months, and every item we touched seemed to carry his presence. "I think that's enough for today," Mom said, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "We can finish this next weekend." I was about to agree when I noticed a small wooden box tucked behind a stack of Mom's old nursing textbooks. It was beautiful, carved with intricate floral patterns, the kind of keepsake box you'd expect to hold jewelry or love letters. I'd never seen it before. "What's in here?" I asked, lifting it carefully. Mom's reaction was immediate and startling. The color drained from her face, and she reached for the box with trembling hands. "Oh, that's just old paperwork. Nothing important." But something in her voice, a tremor, a note of panic, made me hesitate. In 28 years, I'd seen my mother handle everything from medical emergencies at the hospital where she worked to Dad's diagnosis with steady composure. This was different. "Mom," I said gently, still holding the box, "are you okay?" She sat down heavily on an old trunk, suddenly looking every one of her 57 years. For a long moment, we stared at each other in the dusty golden light filtering through the attic window. Finally, she nodded toward the box. "If you're going to open it," she said quietly, "we should go downstairs. We'll need to talk." The box felt heavier as we made our way to the kitchen. Mom busied herself making tea, her movements mechanical and careful. I waited, turning the smooth wood over in my hands, until she finally sat across from me at the table that had witnessed thousands of family meals. "Open it," she said. Inside, beneath a layer of tissue paper, I found a birth certificate, my birth certificate. But it wasn't the one I'd seen before when applying for my passport. This one was different, longer, more detailed, and in the space marked "Father," instead of Robert James Morrison, my dad's name, someone had written Thomas Andrew Sullivan in careful blue ink. I stared at the document for a long time, reading and rereading the unfamiliar name. Thomas Andrew Sullivan. The letters seemed to rearrange themselves as I watched, becoming foreign, meaningless. Then slowly, terrifyingly, they began to make sense. "Tom Sullivan," I said aloud, my voice barely a whisper. Mom nodded, tears already streaming down her cheeks. Tom Sullivan was our milkman. The kitchen seemed to tilt. 28 years of casual jokes, of family laughter, of assuming I knew who I was, all of it crumbled in an instant. I thought of every time the joke had been told, every chuckle from relatives, every moment I'd dismissed the observation about how different I looked from Dad. The truth had been hiding in plain sight, disguised as humor. "He was so young," Mom said, her voice breaking. "We both were. I was 24, married to your father for barely 2 years. Tom was maybe 26, working 3 jobs to put himself through law school. He came by every Tuesday and Friday with the milk delivery, and he was just kind and funny. And when things got difficult with Robert, when he started drinking heavily and staying out late, Tom was someone who listened." She paused, wrapping her hands around her tea mug like it could anchor her to the present. "It wasn't an affair in the way you might think. It happened once. Just once. Robert had been on a 3-day bender, and I was so lonely and scared and confused about my marriage. Tom came by to collect payment for the week's delivery, and I was crying on the front porch. He sat with me. He told me I deserved better. And then she didn't need to finish. I could see the weight of 30 years of secrecy in her shoulders, the relief and terror of finally speaking the truth. Did Dad know? I asked. We never talked about it directly, she said. But when you were born and it became obvious, Robert made a choice. He chose to be your father. He chose to love you as his own. And Tom moved away that fall. He transferred law schools, started a new life somewhere else. I looked down at the birth certificate again, at the name that was apparently half of my genetic identity. Why keep this? Why not just let it go? Because someday you might want to know, she said simply. And because no matter what happened, you deserve the truth, even if I wasn't brave enough to give it to you until now. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of revelation settling between us. I thought about Dad, about how he'd taught me to ride a bike, helped with homework, walked me down the aisle at my wedding just 5 years ago, how he'd never once made me feel like anything less than his beloved son. The love had been real, even if the biology wasn't. Do you know where he is now? I asked eventually. Tom Sullivan? Mom shook her head. I haven't looked. I thought if you ever wanted to find him, that should be your choice to make. Over the following weeks, I found myself staring at that birth certificate often. Thomas Andrew Sullivan. I researched the name online, found several possibilities across the country. A federal judge in Seattle, a corporate lawyer in Atlanta, a small-town attorney in Maine who specialized in family law. Any of them could be him. None of them might be. The strangest part was how it recontextualized everything I thought I knew about myself. Suddenly, my love of reading made sense. Maybe I'd inherited it from a lawyer father instead of developing it independently. My tendency toward careful, methodical thinking might be genetic rather than learned. Even my physical features, which I'd always attributed to some distant relative on Mom's side, now had a clear source. But then I'd remember Dad's hands guiding mine as he taught me to use tools in the garage, his patient voice explaining baseball statistics, the way he'd stayed up all night when I had pneumonia at age 7, monitoring my fever and reading me stories. Biology might explain my appearance, but it couldn't account for the man who had actually raised me. 3 months after finding the certificate, I made a decision. I hired a private investigator, not to make contact, but just to know, to have the full picture. Thomas Andrew Sullivan was the federal judge in Seattle. He'd built a distinguished career, served on the bench for 12 years, had 3 children with his wife of 25 years. In the photograph the investigator provided, I could see myself clearly in his features. The same nose, the same set of the shoulders, the same slightly crooked smile. But I also realized something else as I studied his picture. I didn't need to meet him. The curiosity was satisfied just by knowing he existed, by understanding where half of my DNA had come from. The man who had shaped me, who had formed my character and values and sense of humor, was buried in Riverside Cemetery under a headstone that read, Robert James Morrison, beloved husband and father. I told Mom about the investigation results, and she cried, partly from relief, partly from old grief, partly from gratitude that I wasn't angry with her for keeping the secret so long. Why the joke? I asked her one evening as we were going through more of Dad's things. Why make it into something we all laughed about? She considered this for a long time. I think, she said finally, it was the only way I could live with the truth. If it was just a family joke, then it couldn't hurt anyone. It couldn't threaten what we'd built together. And maybe it was my way of honoring Tom's place in your story without disrupting your father's. Now, 2 years later, I understand what she meant. The joke had been a kind of emotional insurance policy, a way of acknowledging a complex truth while protecting the family we'd created from its potential consequences. It had been brilliant, really, hiding the most important secret in the most obvious place. I still have the birth certificate, stored carefully in my own important documents folder. Sometimes I take it out and look at the name, feeling a connection to a man I'll probably never meet. But mostly, I think about the extraordinary capacity people have for love. The way mom carried this secret for 30 years to protect both her marriage and her son. The way dad chose to father a child who wasn't biologically his. The way a young law student once sat on a porch with a crying woman and changed the course of multiple lives with a single act of kindness. The milkman joke isn't funny anymore, but it's something much more valuable. It's a reminder that families are built on much more than genetics, that truth can exist in many forms, and that sometimes the most profound love stories are the ones that never get told at all.